Welcome to the XY Advisor Podcast, a global community of financial advisors sharing and learning with one another to drive the positive evolution of financial advice. To get involved, go to xyadvisor.com or simply download the XY Advisor app.
What gives me confidence about investment decisions? Rigorous fundamental research, with portfolio managers focused on the long term, who look beyond the spreadsheets to understand the companies they invest in, from break room to boardroom, who know the only way to get a 360-degree view is to go around the world to get it. Can I rely on in-depth research to give me steadfast confidence? With Capital Group, I can.
Welcome back to the XY Advisor Podcast. I'm Fraser Jack, and today I'm joined by Gavin Glozier. G'day, mate.
Good to see and hear you again.
It's been a while. Actually, it's been a while since we've caught up in person, but it's also been a while since you've been on the XY Podcast.
Yeah, it's been, I'd say it'd be about 3.5 years since I was last with Clayton. So, great to be back. Thank you.
Fantastic. And obviously a few things have changed over that time, so we'll go and get through too. But for those that haven't heard you speak before, tell us about your journey into financial services.
Yeah, good question. My background is about 20 years in the financial advice world. I started my time in the institutional world. I started with Royal & Sun Alliance in 2001 and worked with them through the Astron transition in 2004, I think it was, and then moved across to Macquarie Life when that business first started. Spent 3 years with that group, then went across to AMP. It was a heavy insurance space up till then, and then across in AMP, I went across to be the state manager of the IFA sales. And then we had the AXA merger. We inherited more staff and more team and more products that we were working with. And then went across to work with a large IFA business, which was Mark Bynum's business. And up till about 2.5 years ago, we worked together. So I was with him for about 4.5 years, I think it was, and saw an opportunity to grow and do things a bit different, which is a lot of what we'll cover off today. But I think what underpinned everything that I saw in my time in the institutional world up till 2014 when I left was working with advice practices, creating efficiencies and businesses that would strive to the next level was always a passion and a focus. And in the last 2.5 years, this vision and plan that I had has really come to fruition. And now we've got a really good core of businesses that work together in the community. And it's been quite exciting. We did work in some ways with the AFA through the Leaders Forum. We did a lot of work with them over the years, building up this peer-to-peer community, which I chaired for since inception up to a couple of years ago, which was a great experience, and got to work with some really brilliant businesses across Australia. And then, in the last 2.5 years, I've kind of taken that concept and that idea and really taken it out to the right businesses that I felt could get the most value out of it. And here we are today.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's been a heck of a journey, isn't it? And I guess all the way along you were working with advice practices, just trying to work out how to do things better and what a great little, things you can do to tweak or what, whether it's a whole structural rechange or whatever it might be. So interesting journey. And then of course you spent some time in an advice practice, actually becoming an advisor and working on even a licensee. Yeah,
absolutely. So advising now as well. So I've been an AR for the last 3 years, which is a different learning experience all on its own. I think from working with practices on their business and then working in a business, being an AR, working with clients and understanding their needs and their pain points, but also really what they want to get out of life. It's quite a special journey, I think, when you get to work intimately with people's finances and see the relief when they achieve a goal or relief when they avoid something that could have been avoided. it's a really good thing. It's a very simplistic way of saying it, but it really is.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, when you've seen a lot of practices and, worked out, well, I guess it's really easy to see a practice from the outside and go, I would never do that. Oh, that's something I'd always avoid. It's probably a little bit harder to find the good parts and actually say, that's great, I want to start using that and knuckling it down. What was it like for you when you first became an advisor? Was it what you thought?
Yeah, look, it's a really good question. I think one of the things that on the institutional side we tended to get blinded with is we see all these really good things, and one of the kind of lead, I suppose, kind of tools I would use is I would share with advisors, this is what other good practices do. I would never name them or talk specifically about what they do, but we would talk about concepts and ideas of tried and tested ideas that would work really well and try to implement them in practices. But actually going in, rolling up your sleeves and working on those ideas with your own businesses and working with clients is very, very different. And I think one of the biggest learning experiences I had was learning to say no. And I think it was so easy to say, yes, we should really be doing this. I should be doing this. And, I'll get onto that next week and all the rest. And before you know it, you're saying yes to everything and you're the only person who's there to actually deliver and implement it. And I think for me, that was a real learning experience, because I think, as much as you'd love to be everything to everyone, at the end of the day, there's only so many hours in a day that you can really be rolling your sleeves up, working in the trenches, working on your business, in your business, and trying to be with clients and be their trusted advisor. There's only so much you can do, and I think you can be guilty very early on of just trying too hard to be everything to anyone and achieving very little in the same time.
Yes, it's certainly one of those saying no things. That's sort of something that I probably should be working on myself. But it's really interesting. I think what I got out of what you just said then was it's really about the implementation of stuff, right? Not It's all right to say yes, but so long as you're saying yes and getting that actually in place.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if I look back to all the PD days that I've worked with and seen brilliant speakers and seen so many great ideas and concepts, like everyone does, you write down all these great ideas. The missing link I always felt was when you got back to your office and seeing practices get back to their, BAU, business as usual, and not implement these really simple things because they've just got so much other stuff and things in their way. It was always such a waste. And in what we're doing now, a lot of kind of what I've seen as being important and of benefit to the businesses I work with is being that linchpin, able to help them implement, hold people accountable, and getting them focused on what is really important to them, and filter through some of these amazing ideas they may get. And albeit we're not going to as many conferences and definitely face-to-face activity, but there's still ideas and concepts out there. It's about drawing out the right ones, seeing what the cream looks like, what's the high gain, what are the big wins, and then from there helping those practices implement. Because I know kind of when I started the advice practice from scratch, there was only a couple of clients that I had that had come on with me to start with. I had all the time in the world, but very quickly by saying yes to everything, I had only a couple of clients, but not a lot of time in the world, and was sinking very quickly. So, prioritizing and being very clear on what my vision was and sticking to it and making sure I didn't stray too far was a really important thing I learned.
Fantastic. And I want to get the story out of you a little bit later around the old, how did you start this advice practice from scratch? Because it's a difficult thing to do and it takes a lot of time and effort. And as you said, a lot of saying yes, but also working out a few things to say no to. At the same time, you're trying to, raise a family, etc. So before we do that, let's just go up a level. When we spoke to you last time, you were the last on the XY Advisor podcast. You were running a business. It was all around sort of employee benefits. It was around sort of do you want to give us a bit of an overview of that moment and what that business was?
Yeah, so Your Wealth Hub started as an employee engagement program that helped employees in the workplace feel more confident and comfortable with their financial positions. Financial stress still, I believe, is one of the main causes of marriage breakdowns, issues financially when people aren't on the same page. It's just not having a basic literacy of things that are going on, and taking that basic education into the workplace was aimed at reducing the impact of stress in the workplace, so we wouldn't get as many people off work, which inevitably the impact would have been because of some kind of financially related issue that they were experiencing. So that was usually at the heart of it. So that was working well for a number of years. And when
can I just jump in there? And so that was a necessity that you guys found off the back of, say, corporate superannuation books that you had inside the business. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think when you've got the common denominator being superannuation with large corporate super plans, and seeing the impact of choice, there was a diminishing focus on having these corporate super plans in the workplace, but employers were still looking for solutions and outcomes. So we were merely joining the dots between stress is typically related to finance. The common denominator is super. If we can help people, understand and decipher their annual superannuation statement, or look at, basic information about, what is an offset account, what do you do at the end of financial year with your tax return? What are some really simple concepts that you should be considering or thinking about? People will be more informed. People who are more informed will ask more questions and inevitably get some of the solutions that they end up needing. So in the workplace, it was all about enlightening people, and it did serve a purpose. And I think for the employers who really bought into it, and there's a couple that we still work with, they really get that and they really value that. And they see it as if there's only one person we help in a year, and they're super stressed. That's a good outcome if we get someone on the right track, and that's how they saw it.
Fantastic. Yeah, no, it's still obviously a need, but it's also one of those things from a business point of view, and this is a business that you've recently sort of either wound down or wound into your existing practice. But as a supply and demand thing, as you said, some employers get it, and others just don't see. They've got too much. We'll give them the benefit of the doubt. They've got too much else on, and they don't quite see the benefit it brings.
Yeah.
When it comes to actually, like paying for the product, I guess.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think some people see superannuation as a tax, and anything to do that's beyond kind of the bare minimum for their employees, they see as being a bit of a pain in the backside. Typically they weren't the businesses that we wanted to be dealing with. We wanted to see businesses who really cared about their staff, and there was two camps. When you go and see an employee, there was typically the HR manager that absolutely saw a need to do this. And they would have signed on the bottom line in a heartbeat if they could have. But typically, the person who was signing off on what could and couldn't occur was the CFO. Now, the CFO was never seeing how much financial stress was impacting their workplace. So signing off on a reasonable check to invest into their staff members was always seen as being superfluous. So it was kind of met with this kind of mixed emotion. People who really wanted it, and the gatekeeper was typically the CFO who didn't really want to pay for it. So there was that tension point there. And again, for the CFOs that got across the line, we built a calculator actually off the back of some research in the UK and Canada, and we're able to identify the wastage in a workplace based on kind of the prevalence of financial stress, and that tended to work pretty well. But again, at the end of the day, the CFOs would sign off on it, and we didn't always get the outcome that we wanted there.
Yeah, fair enough. So that was one part of the business, obviously. The other part of the business was the financial advice business, and the third part really was the license, or the license as a licensee. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So the licensee evolution has been an interesting one. We started the license. Mark and I started the license in 2016. It was really meant for our firm at the time, and then the idea grew into something bigger. Mark and I went our separate ways a couple of years back for different reasons, and I wanted to take this concept of community to the next level. And I wanted to do two things. I wanted to solve two problems. One is provide a platform where like-minded businesses could come together. They could exchange ideas. We could not recreate the wheel, but enhance on best practice and create an offering that effectively I could be able to go out into their firms and be able to implement and allow them to see the benefits of what this kind of group thinking would do. And the second was to build a community that would cost and feel how I think licensee and groups should be costed. And that was really taking a modular approach to what people actually required, and effectively you pay for what you get. So there's a core function there, and anything beyond that you would effectively scale up or down based on what you needed. So that's effectively what we've done. So in building this licensee, we call it our Vinarc advice community. We have people that are both in our license, so young practices that are growth focused, that really want to deliver a really good outcome to their clients. They focus on not being technically perhaps the most extravagant advisor, but they really focus on the holistic needs of the client, and they bring in specialists from various areas to be able to deliver the outcomes they need for their clients. But they know that they must invest in their business, and they know that they must be nimble enough to grow, and to do that in the community. The best way to do it is not individually all work on our own solution, but all discuss the challenges that we're facing, and find the common denominator between all of us, and create this best practice, and then kind of move forward together collectively with it. And that's what we've tried to create. And so far we've been able to attract some really good young businesses. And we've been able to create model office. We've created this this offshore program for administration tasks. We've got centralized paraplanning services. We've got a marketing team. We've got a new HR function that's just started up for practices to tap in as well. So it's building every day, and where we see a need to expand the service offering, we simply go out and search for the results we need, and plug in those services so it can help the greater group.
Fantastic, Neil. I'm just going to clarify this part of the licensee, and there's a little bit different between the hub, I guess you could say, or the group, and the license itself, right? Because you run a license, and under that you've got certain amount of advisors who are using you as your AFSL, and then you've also got additional advisors that also use the group or a part of the group, but with the different AFSL. Is that right?
That's correct. So we have 9 firms under the AFSL. We've got an additional 5 firms that tap into the group collective that may be either self-licensed or licensed under another AFSL. So it's a group of 14 at the moment practices. And in that, those principals all subscribe to a quarterly summit where we come together and discuss critical business issues that we've been kind of throwing about unofficially through the quarter. And then in that meeting, in that summit, we'll have a deep dive into how we solve those problems. So yeah, absolutely. There's a delineation between the two. It's intentional. Obviously, there's a regulatory element to it, obviously for businesses under the license, and there's different conversations we have on our quarterly investment and compliance committee meetings. And then the summit's all about business. The summits are all about getting together and solving issues and focusing on your practice. There's no compliance speak. It's very much about solving problems that relate to better outcomes for clients, better outcomes for practices, profitable business activity, and that positive kind of conversation about how we get together and go forward.
So just when you do that, as you said, solving problems, but and we touched on it earlier, they're actually implementing of something to solve that problem, not just talking about the problem. Give us a couple of examples, or an example of something that you might have worked out and then solved and then created something that's available for the whole group to use. Yeah,
sure. So the annual summit we hold in August each year, we're about to have our third. Last year, we listed the critical issues that we expected to be discussing over the next 12 months. And obviously, how you engage through COVID was obviously a hot topic last year. Funnily enough, it's a hot topic again this year. How we manage our administration staff, and how we delineate between core activities, and how we delineate between activities that we can utilize a lower cost resource to solve the problem. So how we manage that and how we kind of work around that. There's issues around how we market ourselves, how do we get presence on social media, how do we get presence through building better websites, how does SEO work, who can help us with that type of thing. So they were kind of 3 key topics that we talked about. But the one that shone to the top of the tree in that last annual summit was all about building a model office. And it was all about how we manage our workflows. Most of us use Advice OS through Midwinter. And in that, there was opportunity to utilize what's there, but there's also opportunities to utilize best practice around. Now, some people had used Monday.com as a workflow processing tool. What we did was, after that session, we made a commitment to solve a number of problems, but this one was the most, I think was the most important for us all. We wanted to create a model office that we could all follow our processes start to finish. So we basically invested a lot of time and money into building Monday out to be a model office, and then allow us to download the different streams of or different tasks. So everything from kind of client prospecting to client implementation to client onboarding to annual reviews as the 4 key kind of processes to start with. Map that out end to end, download it, upload it into everyone's own Monday, so then they can start following it start to finish as well. So now anytime we make changes to one process as opposed to everybody kind of going off and doing their own thing. Now, one of the elements that I said up front that I think never really worked well after having conferences and PD days and so forth, it was actual implementation. And my job is not just to kind of hold people accountable, it's actually going and work out how we implement these every month. To remove the speed humps, understand what they are, acknowledge we need to work with them, but it's actually going in and help actually implementing these. So I think the vast majority of practices now actually use Monday, which is great, or at least reflect on the processes that we built. And then from there, they're rolling through the motions and using in their business. And it's happened a lot quicker should they have, had they not have had the help of the community, because we've all worked on this and refined it, which is good.
So so if I join as a practice, instead of me having to reinvent the wheel and go and do the research and work out what I'm going to use and then work out how to use it and then put the workflows in place and see if they test and all those sort of things, you just go and do all that for all of your practices.
Yes. Yeah, exactly right. So when a new practice comes along now, we've already got those workflows set up. And it's been licensed, approved, community approved, everyone's working together, that they would jump in. And, if they're a new practice, perhaps they've left a bigger firm, starting on their own firm, and they're starting from scratch like I was 2.5 years ago. I would have loved to have a product in a box, so to speak, where you could pick up and run with it. So, that library of resources is growing, which is great.
Yeah. Now, part of that, I guess, from a mindset point of view, from a practice coming in, is that you have to have belief and trust in the person who's going out and doing all the testing and checking and those sorts of things. So I guess that comes from your, I guess we covered that with your years of experience working in practices.
Yeah, absolutely. Part of it is me and what I use in my practice, but also part of through the feedback of the collective. And that's where the community comes in. So I think, you're only as strong as your weakest link. That type of analogy definitely prevails, but you only get out of it what you put in at the same time. And I think it's very hard, and we don't have this in our community because everyone, it's very clear from the outset, if you're joining this community, you're a contributor, you're not a wallflower, you're not sitting back waiting, you are contributing, and everyone has different elements that they contribute at different points because we know what everyone's strengths are. And if the businesses are joining, the expectation from the community on me is that we're finding people who are culturally aligned, and we're looking very much at the future. We're probably not worrying so much about some of the things that some parts of the profession are concerned about, because for us, our businesses are probably more growth focused, younger client base, and some of those other distractions aren't a focus for us at all.
Yeah, very, very interesting. I couldn't agree more when it comes to communities. I think you have to be a contributor. If you don't, we've both been part of communities before, and we've seen that, haven't we? The more you put in, the more you get out. And if you think you're coming along to a community and you're just going to put dollars in and expect that that's going to give you a return, it doesn't quite work that way, does it?
No, you can't. You can't sit back. And I think this is a common misconception. I think if people are throwing money at solutions, it's not going to give them what they want because they're not putting their own blood, sweat, and tears into it. We have 25 staff now who are based overseas. And as I say to every practice who's coming on and they want to look at offshoring and they want another solution, it's not up to the person offshore to solve your problems. You have to tell them what the problems are. And unless you can clearly identify and articulate what it is that you're trying to solve and work with them and show them how we can replicate the issue and it's easily quantifiable, that person overseas isn't going to be able to solve your problem because they're going to be just as confused about what to solve as you will be. And I've seen plenty of examples where people have kind of shied away from offshore because it hasn't worked and all the rest. But the question I'd always ask is, well, how have you prepared yourself? How have you prepared your team? Are the people you're working with treated as a member of the team? What are you doing to ensure that the ongoing education and training is up to speed? All these types of things. And obviously, if you've met with a few kind of confused looks, you know that they've really just thrown some money at a problem and not really got the result they're after. Surprise, surprise. So, the community collaboration piece is important. It is the backbone of kind of why we do what we do.
Yeah, fantastic. I love the idea of getting involved in the community. The sense of belonging to me, belonging to a community is that, you give and you receive, and you feel like you're giving value, or other people in the community value you because you're having input as well as you're getting input about. So it's definitely a two-way street. Now, you mentioned the offshoring in the Philippine side, having an office or a group of people working for you over there. Tell us about how you set that up and how you went about finding that and implementing it.
Yeah, good question. So we've worked with different groups offshore in the past, and there's a couple of people that I worked with for some time who decided when I transitioned across to my own business, they wanted to come across and work with us. So that's where we got started. And from there, once the community started to build out and we had people coming in, and we started realizing there was problems that needed to be solved, and we could do that efficiently by having an outsourcing solution. Through word of mouth initially was how we tracked down key resources that would solve problems offshore. The practices here have had a really, really good time with all the staff that have come on board. We've focused really hard on trying to source good people, and recently started a new process to really go deep into sourcing really good talent to join a number of our teams, be it paraplanning, marketing, administration, etc. So I feel at the moment we're in a really good period where we've been able to attract some really good caliber staff. The issues that they're facing over there are not too dissimilar to here, with lockdowns and travel restrictions and things like that. So there's a lot of really good staff that had been working in big call centers that unfortunately can't continue. They may have been camping in the offices or camping close to the office and doing things like that, but realizing that it's not a great outcome from a family perspective, not seeing your family for months on end and things like that. So looking for a home-based solution is a good option. Now, all our staff are decentralized, and they certainly relish in the fact that they can be close to their family, but still have good internet, good security measures to be able to track all the activity that's going on. So from a privacy and security perspective, it's very secure. But the issue for us has been trying to find the good staff, which I think we're at a period now where we've got the formula right, and we're growing, and we're certainly solving problems for the community a lot easier now than we had been in the past.
Yep. So you find, let's say, let's pick on a marketing or a social media posting type person, and that person then works across the different businesses within the community, but in their specialty area.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have specialized people that basically solve different problems for us. Some may be full-time, some may be contract that come on and work a couple of hours a week, but they solve that particular problem. The way we've structured our agreements is that we can scale them up and scale them down based on what's needed. It means that the community have access to resources that individually they wouldn't have had access to before. And again, that's part of the scale we'll be able to bring, where you're not just working for one business through a Fiverr or an Airtasker style relationship. We're actually structured it through a specific financial services relationship, and we just slot in the work as needed based on what's required. The great part about it is a lot of us are now using the same style of communication, so it's then interchangeable based on newsletter topics that we may want to use. You may want a different one. Business has just started using us. They want more of a business ownership flair as opposed to a personal finance need. So our template is set up. We track everything through the back of Active Campaign. And through that, we're able to just chop and change for the different businesses based on their style, the timing, etc. that they're after. So it becomes highly personal, but we've set up structures that means that it's interchangeable through templates, etc.
And you mentioned earlier that it's, when you're finding something like this, you really have to be very clear on what your problem is. I find sometimes it's really hard to be clear on what your own problem is. It's a lot easier to be clear on what somebody else's problem is.
Well, it's easy to grandstand like that, I suppose. But it's a valid observation. I think you're dead right. For us, having people joining the community and understanding what problem they're solving often has more clarity after you've mixed in with the community itself, because others would have experienced the problems they're looking to solve. So by meeting and greeting and kind of understanding what others are doing, you're able to articulate it far more eloquently. And I think for them, understanding what they're trying to achieve out of it, it's likely someone else has probably gone through the same process, and then it's more of an aha moment. And I need to do this. What can you do? Oh, actually, we've done that before. Let's roll out one of the guys, and they can explain how we did it. Away you go. So you're right. It can be hard in isolation, but I think through, again, the value of the community and seeing what others have done, you can certainly point yourself in the right direction.
Yeah. Now, there's a group of, as you mentioned, 14 practices. How does it work practically, from a practical point of view? Are they all around the country? How often do you get together? How do you communicate?
Yeah. We try to get together every quarter. In the last 6 months, we've done 2 virtual. We're going to have our next one at the end of this month. It was supposed to be a physical one. We're just kind of understanding what the landscape's looking like at the moment. We have our WhatsApp chat that we talk on. We've been talking to the guys at XY about utilising their new licensee solution as well. So I've been talking to Emily. She took me through that last week. Actually, it looks really good. So it's likely that we may shift and utilise the XY platform, because I think it will solve a problem around kind of that ongoing engagement piece that perhaps for us is a little disjointed at the moment, having multiple platforms as opposed to one. So that's certainly something that I'm looking at. The physical presence, I think by far gives us the best value. It's that fireside chat, those little conversations that you're having in the breaks and things like that I still think you get the most value out of. Bringing people together and kind of going through the critical issues, I think, is the fuel for the fire. Digesting that with everybody and talking about those after over a beer or whatever it may be, I think is where the most value is. So for me, having a physical presence is critically important to success. We're navigating how that works, constantly because of obvious kind of issues that are going on. But in my mind, as the community grows, we will get to a cap where I think the community grows beyond what would be an intimate environment. So we don't want to grow too much, because I think you will lose that fireside chat conversation. You end up having kind of hives of activity and silos form, and I certainly don't want that. I think that's where you become. I think the right word's obsolete, but I think you have issues with people doing their own thing and not kind of contributing to the pot. They're contributing to their silo as opposed to the broader community. I think that's where my job is to make sure we don't grow too fast and we don't lose that intimacy.
What are your thoughts around numbers then in that case?
Yeah, look, I've tossed the idea around of 20 practices. That's kind of been a number that I've thought's really workable. I've seen small to medium-sized licensees, boutiques, etc., grow and lose that intimacy. You've got the people that were there first, the new people that were brought in after. You tend to see an us and them situation. You don't get that mixing of ideas because there's too many of them and not enough of us, and so on. So I think you need to be realistic about how that goes. Definitely in the community, I think there's like a 20 practice limit. For our annual summit, we bring in other advisors that perhaps are part of those groups as well. So there's more people coming along to experience what's going on. It's a great kind of tool to expose them to what business principles are thinking, which I think is an important part. In the license, we've always talked about this 12 to 14 car number, which may have 18 to 20 ARs in it as well. So therefore, you'll always have part in the license and part external. I think it's important to have that mix as well. I think if you spend too much time in your own pond and not understand what other people in their ponds are doing, you can tend to be a little bit siloed in yourself. So I think that external license with that community feel is important. And own AFSLs, people who are in other AFSLs, so larger licenses coming on as well, I think is a really, really good thing as well for diversity.
Yeah, really interesting. And okay, so you're slowly growing, I guess, is the outcome of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
very, very good. Now, so that's sort of the group or the licensing or the coaching that you do. How often do you get together? You mentioned the quarterly catch-ups, but are you doing more regular catch-ups than that?
Yeah, we do a coaching session with each of the principals once a month, and that's really where the rubber hits the road. The think tank is the summit. The action is the catch-ups, and it's all about understanding what happens from a cash flow perspective, what's happened with that initiative that you said that you were going to deliver, because it delivered X results. It's that catch-up after is where we understand if it's working, if it's not working. At the moment, we're about to catch up again, as I said. We'll go through the end of financial year results. Everyone's given us their numbers. We catch up quarterly, and the first session we have in our summit is always, how is everyone tracking? And it's not designed to beat one's chest and to talk about how good each of us are. None of us in the group have that approach. It's about understanding how we're going as a percentage to the goals that we set at the start of the year. So I've no interest in understanding the dollar figure except to understand if you've actually achieved it for a percentage, and that's the important part. And the plans that are in place, we're able to shift and modify along the way should the results that we're after not be occurring. And it's those shifting conversations that we have in those monthly catch-ups, and changing tact. Might be changing subtly wordings with referral partners, or it could be understanding how better to engage. And we went down a path of these newsletters, but perhaps the content isn't hitting the mark. So it's about understanding, well, what else could we do? Let's really pull apart the types of clients you're trying to attract, and where are they going? What are they reading? What topics are of interest to them? What can we do to solve these problems that they're having, and then tailor the newsletter articles appropriately to that group. So it's those types of conversations. That's like I said, that's where the rubber hits the road, and that's what I think the most important part.
Yeah, so this is next level actually. Now that we're getting into it, so obviously, if you can't measure it, you can't. Was it that? If you can't measure it, you can't. What's the saying? Can't measure, you can't. Anyway, you can't grow. So obviously, we're talking about goals and talking about helping advisors, and the accountability word comes in here. I guess you're keeping them accountable, but you mentioned that everybody's sharing metrics. So. Yep. What does that mean? Does that people talk about where they're able to with their goals, and then it's now open to the group? So I guess you've got to, if you say you're going to do something, you've got to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. So on the 6-month mark, at the start of the year, we did it. So at the full year last year, in the August summit last year, we did it as well. It was what was the operational goals and what were the financial goals. So financial goals were set for the new financial year. Operational goals were set at the start of the calendar year. So we set out to understand what are the problems they're looking to solve and how we're going to solve it. When we've caught up to talk about these things, there was one practice that was talking all about HR engagement. They've merged with a couple of firms. They've wanted to work out how to engage. They've actually brought in an external business coach to help them as well on more of the HR philosophical pieces that they need to work through. But then setting KPIs, setting job descriptions, setting bonus structures and things like that. We've talked about how that works, in particularly in your FASEA world. For them, operationally, they wanted to see all these KPIs aligned. They wanted to see all the staff members come in, sing from the same hymn sheet. So they're all heading in the right direction, and they're working as a cohesive group as opposed to 3 separate practices that they were at the start of the year. So that's just an example of one. Back 6 months for that practice, it was all about, well, what are we trying to achieve financially? One of the goals was they wanted to merge with another firm. They wanted to they wanted to bring in a mortgage broking firm as well. So looking at those goals, the financial benefits to their existing clients and whatnot, deciphering how that was going to work, how much time would be taken away from their BAU work with clients. Part of another project they're working on was repricing that middle end of the clients. They felt that they needed to increase their average fee. So doing that, they had to create new propositions for the people that would or wouldn't pay the additional cost. So once you start kind of scratching the surface, the goals are, they're aspirational, but what powers the goal? So the conversations we will be having and sharing with the group is, okay, so what is it that you need to do in the business? What needs to shift? How can we make this happen? So that's what we try to look at. And then from there, the collective understands the goal. Everyone's across everybody's goals, what they're trying to do, both financially and operationally. And then that's where the think tank starts, because people have shared their experience of when they've done something similar, or maybe they want to understand what it is that they could do because they'll be in the same situation at some point as well. So it lifts the lid, and it becomes quite a deep conversation.
Yeah, well, so it's really around that transparency and accountability, and just saying, well, don't just come here and say, oh yeah, it's all's going fine. That doesn't actually help anybody. If it's not, then we actually get in there and fix it.
Exactly, and then the numbers will show that. If the numbers have been calibrated accurately, you'll see how those transitions have gone if they've actually followed through what they said they were going to do. And now it'll show up, and the numbers don't lie in that instance. You look at staff turnover, you look at expenses line. So we typically track inflows, so total revenue. We'll track expenses. We'll track different business lines. If people are focusing on financial planning and insurance and different elements, they'll have different business lines that they're tracking to make sure that A, they're retaining the right number of clients, but B, attracting the right number of clients as well. So that'll flow through the metrics that we share. And there's a fair bit around that. And as much as the guys, they all love me asking them for their numbers. They do appreciate, once they've done it, looking back to see what they've achieved. And irrespective if they're over or under, the fact that they can visualize it and see it, they know exactly where they are. And I think the challenge for practices in the years gone by has been not knowing your numbers, not understanding the metrics behind your business, and profitability has been, well, what's left over. But that's not really I don't think that's really the figure you should be looking at. It's understanding what's gone into that number. What I should be looking at, should I be managing my expense line more carefully? Is staff a third of your expenses? Because typically that's the case. Or is it higher? Why is it higher? What can we do to solve that problem? And that's where things like outsourcing staff and bringing in a reduced cost for a headcount can be more advantageous in a practice that's growing, but is of a decent size where they do need that support. It's just being able to identify it. So all those metrics are pulled apart and they're challenged in a constructive way. But it means people, I think the community are far more comfortable with how they run their business now than they had been before.
Yeah, well, that's incredible. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's not easy opening up your metrics and sharing them, and so. But if you're doing it for all the right reasons, and you're doing it for the reasons of so that you can physically grow your practice or grow the metrics, the right metrics, then well done. Hats off to you. So, just before I wanted to come back and ask you all about starting your advice practice from scratch. But before we do that, if somebody's interested in that coaching group or that mentoring group that you run, what's the best way to get hold of you and talk about that?
Yeah, look, our website's live. We can arrange a catch up through the website, or reach out to me at so it's vinarc.com.au. You can catch us on there, or reach out on my mobile, LinkedIn.
So Vinarc is spelled Vinarc.
That's it.
Fantastic. Okay, very good. So if you're interested in catching up with Gav about that, give him a buzz or get hold of him. Now, tell me about your practice. Obviously, starting an advice practice from scratch is not a thing to be sneezed at. Talk to us about your process of you went through to start that, and sort of what made you. Let's start with the decision to do it itself.
Yeah, I think starting an advice practice, looking back at it now, I always think that at the time when I was in another practice and you have the safety net of a good salary and whatnot, it seems like a pretty good idea at the time. And you really don't realize how hard it is. And look, I was studying at the time when I was going through, I started on all the FACEA stuff early. I think I was just about finishing my advanced diploma. There was a whole bunch of other things that were going on, and it was a really interesting time looking back at it now. Since then, my wife and I have had a little girl. She's 1.5. The license has grown. The planning business has grown. The community has kind of blossomed, and we've got some fantastic businesses. All that going on, and I've got my little old advice practice that I kicked off 2.5 years ago. It was quite an experience. To start it off, to me, it seemed like the right thing to do because I really cared about the clients that I was working with in the other practice that I was in. I didn't want to lose contact. I didn't want to let them go, so to speak, because I really valued their friendship and I really valued the work we had done previously. And I really saw that I saw some gaps in, I suppose, some of the advice processes that were out there. And, I really believed in the cash flow story. I really believed in understanding where people spend their money. People could make more informed decisions around, what they should and shouldn't be doing. And it wasn't about saying no, but it was about, letting them make the decision and having a really good constructive conversation. I think people make their own choices, and I really wanted to build a business, which was underpinned by cash flow. And there's a couple of guys who do it really, really well. Steve in Melbourne, Adele in Newcastle, they kill this space. And I think for me, I saw that as an opportunity, and I think that they've done really well. So when I looked at building it, I really wanted to have that in mind. And I wanted to just be that kind of concierge point, that trusted advisor that everyone talks about, but getting the questions about, what do I do with like my offset account? What do I do? You get people calling and say, look, I've got this this home and contents insurance. Should I bundle this in with my car insurance? They're really simple things, but I found that a lot of people just didn't really know where to turn. So I wanted to be able to have those really simple conversations that were really empowering for people. But I also wanted to, really help people long term build wealth and set themselves up financially. Our tagline, is live the life you want to live. I really believe that. If you're in control of your finances, you can do it. So that dream, albeit it was bloody hard, was what powered it. And I thought I could do it. And in doing that, I started from scratch, built a licensed community and the license itself. And it's been going since.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's obviously it's a small feat starting a financial advice business when that's what you're doing 100% of the time. But when you're running a licensee and working with other businesses and coaching and doing all these other things and raising young kids, it certainly is a lot of extra.
Yeah, I'll make one comment that one thing I did do was. I got, and it's about saying no. It was something we talked about earlier, and it's one thing that was always drummed into me for years is know your worth and know what the values you're bringing, and don't be afraid to charge a fee. And if people say no, then obviously there's a kind of a disconnect between what's value to them and what's value that they think you're delivering. And at the end of the day, you can only improve that with communication. At the end of the day, if the client doesn't really want to go down that path, and I don't think you should be chasing or undercutting your fee. So that was kind of one thing that I saw, and I didn't set myself too lofty expectations either. I wanted to get one new client a month that I could really manage well, and that's pretty much been my run rate since inception. So from that, it's been really good. I have been working with an accountancy firm as well. We started a joint venture. That went well for probably the first 18 months, and it kind of tapered off after a period of time. And we still work together, and we work with their mutual clients. It's been great, but we've recently moved those clients in with Your Wealth Hub advice. So from that side, there was a lot of work, a lot of activity, and I wanted to again see those clients through and make sure that they were getting the right advice, and we could still continue. So I think part of that is a result of wanting to be everything to everyone, and kind of it was challenging juggling both of those businesses.
Yeah, exactly. And now Your Wealth Hub advice part is the employee benefit / the work that you're doing with sort of with groups or a larger amount, a lot of financial education in that space, I guess you could say. And you mentioned that you went heavy on cash flow, and so you got cash flow systems in place now. That's where you start with any financial plan?
Yeah, a lot of it. I have to understand their budget to start with, and if I understand where people are spending their money, and a lot of time people don't understand where they're spending their money, I want to see first and foremost the high level. What's the inflow? What's the outflow? Is this consistent? Is there a surplus or a deficit on average? Okay, we've got the run rate. Now let's scratch the surface and go under and go deeper into where that actually is. And I use My Prosperity as our cash flow tool. I still think probably the best one out there from what I've seen. And there's different kind of carriers coming into the space regularly, but for me, it's the one that works for us. And in the first meeting or second meeting, we'll be getting people onto there and getting them comfortable with the concept and letting them jump on and look at where they're spending their money, and it'll give us a good indication of what's going on. And I always position the budget spreadsheet that we've created. I get the client to fill that in first, and that's more of a, this is where you think you are, and then get onto my prosperity, and then we see where you actually are. And it's more of a, oh, okay, rightio, okay, we get this now. So we have to go through that process so they kind of value the benefit of having the tool. And once they get the tool and they see the source of truth, then from there you make an informed decision. And then from there, when we start looking at saving for your first home or buying investment property or whatever it may be, even people at the other end, I've got a half dozen clients who are retiree clients or pre-retirees, sorry, 3 retirees, 3 pre-retirees. They've not been aware of their spending habits either. And running into retirement without a handbrake is dangerous, particularly when you cross the line and you're all of a sudden trying to live on typically what people will say is, $1,000 a week, that'll tie me over, she'll be right. But then you realize you're spending, 1,400. So where's the shortfall going to come from? So it's a big eye opener for them.
Absolutely. It's a great, even just knowing where you're up to is great therapy in the first place, whether it's behind, or whether you're going forwards or backwards, it's good just to know. That's a very, very great step in the right direction. Now, you mentioned before that you value your worth and you don't want to work for free for this sort of stuff. Yeah. How did you go about pricing a cash flow model?
Yeah. So for us, I have the strategy fee that we separate from ongoing, and for creating SOA, the minimum typically sits at $3,000. That's usually where we sit, and that's a full review of everything. And depending on the complexity, if we're including an SMSF, family trust, multiple investment strategies, et cetera, that's when the cost can go up. For the ongoing, I found that a core would always be around cash flow and the work we do monthly to make sure people are aware of what's going on. So we always charge that $200 base. If we're managing an insurance strategy, it's an extra $100. If we're managing a superannuation strategy, it's another $100. Family trust, it's another $100. Self-managed super fund, it's another $100 as well. So we've created it from a modular perspective, so it just scales up as you need to. So the more complex and the more work, that's where the amount of time came in at, roughly that $100 mark per product set going forward, or strategy going forward is where we found it.
Is that per month or per meeting?
Per month. Month.
And how often do you meet with them?
Everyone we talk to at least monthly. The physical obviously is less now, but we're doing a hell of a lot of Zoom calls and whatnot. So we tend to do 45-minute catch-ups for a lot of the younger clients who really want to talk through this stuff. And what I've found is that there is a core of people that just want to bounce whatever comes up for the month and talk through what it is that they've done or want to do, and they're considering different things. And again, that might be things like, I've got the car insurance here and the GI here. What do I do? What are bundling discounts? I've heard about this stuff. How does this work, et cetera, et cetera. So, those types of conversations.
Yeah, this is an interesting part of cash flow, isn't it? Actually having regular catch-ups to start with to actually have people go through a process where they change habits, not just change their mind or set a goal or those sorts of things, but actually change the habits that they, form over a lifetime. It's hard. And without monthly catch-ups, it's really easy just to say, oh, yeah, I'll do that and never get around to doing it.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because it's very confronting for people who don't want to do it, but for the people who kind of don't want to do it and then realize it, they really value it. They realize, I didn't realize we could do that. Even just having all of their finances together in the My Prosperity portal, I think is a benefit for people who may not want to do the deep dive into cash flow, but now they certainly value seeing the income and expenses each month. They get to see a headline. They've worked off these complex spreadsheets for some time, and now they're not having to do that. So it saves them a lot of time. So I think it's interesting. We typically every month pull out and extract from the report the headline number so they can see the income and the expenses. And anything that's of a variance of more than 10% from each category, we'll send across to them and get them to validate it. So, are you aware this is what's going on? Any thoughts, any concerns? And typically they'll write back straight away, oh yeah, no worries. I had we had the annual payment for the insurance to come through, so that's gone out. And you know what? We've already provisioned for that, so we take that across from one of the bucket accounts, and that's fixed up. So a lot of the time, people are feeling happy. I was with a client doing an annual review 2 weeks back, and they said that they've never felt more in control of their finances, which was just such a beautiful compliment. Like I really felt good about it. Everything's working well. Automatic transactions are coming from different accounts all the time. At first I'm like, 7 accounts, geez, that's a lot. How are we going to do all this? But once it's set up, it actually does the work for you. And now they never run short. Birthday presents, Christmas presents, all that stuff, they're all provisioned for, and there's no concern in chasing their tail. So it was really lovely to hear that, and it just really went to the heart of why we do what we do. And for them, there's no concern anymore, which is great.
It is amazing. It is a beautiful comment, and the fact that they feel value, they feel it, I guess, is the key there. They never felt this good before, and that's the real value of financial advice, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. Well, Gavin, it certainly appears that your advice practice sort of mirrors a lot of the work you do as for clients, but you're also doing the very similar work for other practices when it comes to the work within Vinarc. So sort of I can see the parallels being drawn there of how you're working with both your advice clients as well as the other practices.
Yeah, thanks.
Now, Gav, thanks so much for coming and sharing your story today. Really appreciate it, giving us an update of where you're up to now. Obviously, things have changed. We'll have to get you on in a couple more years and see how it's all evolved.
Yeah, love to, Fraser. Thanks so much for your time, mate. I really appreciate it.
No worries. And if you want to reach out to Gav, obviously you mentioned the Vinarc website, but what other ways of getting hold of you? LinkedIn, maybe? Yeah,
LinkedIn, or give me a hit on the mobile, probably the best way. So we'll keep it in the link, I think, perhaps, and we can reach out.
Fantastic. Thanks, Gav. Appreciate your time.
No worries. Thanks, Fraser.
Well, there you have it, another episode of the XY Advisor podcast. I'm Fraser Jack, and I'm joined by Emily. G'day, Emily.
Hey, Fraser. Our favourite time of the week.
It is an amazing time of the week. We get to shout out one of the amazing community members of XY. Who are we doing today?
Yes, so shout out to Michael Miller. He is an XY champion, constantly in the platform adding value and answering questions, but he's also a wonderful resource for sharing important updates that are coming down from the top. So he recently shared some work or updates, I should say, on advice fees from Super. Now, it really revolved around trustees, but had some really important takeouts that advisors should be across. It went bananas last week when we shared it. Everyone wanted to make sure they were up to date on it. So thank you, Michael, for sharing. Obviously, very topical and very important at the moment.